In 2012, I was introduced to a new way of being conscious by Mary Magdalene. And the daunting reality of the experience continues to be a foundation of how I live. I was in Northern California, tired, and more tired by life and not knowing how to piece together my choices than by physical exhaustion day to day, which was pretty extreme. I didn't have a home. I was at odds with my girlfriend. My confusion about my calling was sort of ever present. I had a hard time believing what I believed, that I had spiritual gifts that I was supposed to share with the world. And the responsibility of it was not something I knew how to handle well. So I prayed for what to do, and I felt drawn to go to Mount Shasta, a place I'd been 4 times before, a place that had begun many aspects of my spiritual journey and activated me to understand a deeper relationship to this reality. It took me quite a while to get there, an extraordinary amount of time. I hitchhiked and it was very slow. I slept in the woods for 3 nights. Sometimes woods, there was a patch of trees, next to a road. And yet I was very determined, and it felt quite clear this is where I needed to go. And when I finally got there, I visited a national park space where I knew I could camp, near water where I knew I could swim, and a spring with the freshest, most beautiful water in the world that I could drink while I fasted for 2 weeks. And I needed to clear myself to understand what was underneath everything and what really mattered to me. And so I chose a more remote location, and ironically, it was a public space where other people were allowed to be, and people just left. I tuned it right, the timing was good, and my tent was really alone for most of those days. And I spent my time walking and going down to the water and getting in the water and walking some more, slowly, thinking. After 5 days, I was lonely, tired, and I got up and didn't move one day. I just sat. No, I sat often and meditated, but it was later in the day and I was still sitting when I felt the presence of Jesus. Now, this was a time when I received messages a lot, but somehow I didn't talk to Jesus much. I'd grown up Christian, and it was almost like the youngest part of myself thought of it as sacrilegious or something. But his presence was piercing. He told me I needed to eat meat. Now, I hadn't eaten meat in 12 years, maybe more. I'd been vegetarian and then vegan, with very, very few exceptions. And it was built into who I was and my rejection of society. I could not tolerate a world in which animals are abused in the way they're abused. So I cried. I cried to have this unity of an influence from Jesus present in my loneliness, telling me to change this crucial boundary to who I'd been. And he said, trust the world, that I'm not giving myself the strength to defend my dreams, and that the part of me that is more like a carnivore had pursued and hunted the dreams that I'd chosen, and I wasn't seeing it through because I wasn't feeding myself right. This was not the message I anticipated hearing from Jesus. But I was tired, and I was humble, and I listened. Bear in mind, listening was being present. It's telepathic. To someone who experiences such, there isn't doubt from inside it. You can reflect on it and wonder if it's real, but I don't. The presence was more real than anything else I knew. And at the end of our conversation, he told me he wanted to introduce me to his wife. I was open to this. I'd studied the historical literature enough to consider it probable. But it was very daunting having the presence of Jesus tell me that it was true. It's one thing to look through the past and comb it for details and argue over the truth of things. But there's a safety in that. It's so far away. The immediacy of his presence was something that somehow I understood. The more I gave into it, the less I could ever go back. And as he shifted my attention to Mary, Magdalene, it was over. She began talking to me in a form I had never experienced. Fast. So, I see you've understood this about yourself, but did you watch this? I really don't understand why you were... Do you remember when you were engaging with that person? Why did you think that they would listen to you? You're still acting like they're going to listen. Let her go. Wait, you were reading that book. You never finished the book, but you feel sad you didn't finish the book. Why do you feel sad? Didn't you notice your instincts were good? That was not the right path for you yet. You consider it a failure that you didn't finish. Let it go. And on and on. For 3 days. Non-stop. Combing through everything that I had dreamed of in the course of my life for the past 10 years. I had spent 10 years adrift. I was searching. I was journeying. I felt the call and the presence of Holy Spirit guiding my way, giving me magical rides and opportunities time and time again. But I was not in charge. And I had practically made that a virtue. I decided that my level of surrender was my virtue, my goodness, my path, my calling. It was difficult to be that surrendered and to trust, even when I didn't have food or money or a shelter. And yet, here they were telling me that that was now a problem, that it was no longer time for me to be this way. And I still tense, like remembering it. Having combed through my mind in this way, she slowed down and I started getting visions. It'd been all mental as I remember it, just her voice, her presence, and just going so fast that I couldn't outthink it. I couldn't change the subject or distract myself. She really cornered me in memories that it was dauntingly intimate to feel her presence and thoughts and feelings and memories that no one had been there. And she was right there with me, inside of me. Well, I'd been lonely, and I wasn't anymore. And that's when she explained it, very simply. Christ, Mary Magdalene, married Mary. Magdalene, Christ, Helen, Crystalline. Crystalline consciousness is the unity of the many different facets of being alive. And more so than we realize, culture throughout all of human understanding has been fractured, has been different facets of light shown through a crystal. Individual rays are collections of rays, vibrations that don't unify. They exist in reaction against, in separation from other frequencies. And as a result, entire communities of people are taught to believe and think and breathe their lives in relation to fractured energy. Something very special happens when you learn to refuse to identify with one frequency in a manner that rejects another. Because so many cultures have originally been created in rejection of each other. I am this and I am not that. So learning to transcend this involves the transcendence of your identity as a gender as well, and reaches you into incarnations in other cultures. As you're able to create a framework within yourself that can embrace this, you begin to feel it. And you start to learn to sense the personality you had in other lifetimes. The crystalline consciousness is this transcendence. To understand that you are the being, the spirit that incarnated into many different bodies. And thus return into this body and by all means be who you are in this life. Be your unique personality, be your gender, be the forces associated with the culture that you are most akin with. Yet hold it within yourself with an understanding that this is an embodiment, it's temporary. And when it's over, you're going to return into this presence that you begin to get to know more and more. And as you relate to it more and more, you can allow a gravity. At first you're reaching, working, like climbing to piece together the different aspects of this truth. But as you get enough of it set in, it starts to pull you. And that's a beautiful transition. It's less frustrating. It's less work in many ways. And it becomes your responsibility to allow and support this transition into embracing the truth within yourself about who you are. As you do that, you get to be it with everyone around you. You'll find that many fights no longer make sense, that you're easily able to see the goodness in everyone. And even when it is particularly nasty, you can recognize the trauma beneath the nastiness without trying. You see it. You care about it. This is the beginning of a new way of being. I embody it frequently enough to love and trust it. And when I slip from it, it pulls me back into my truth and faces me with whatever it is that stands in the way. What aspects of my past am I not at peace with? What habits are holding me at bay? What mental commitments or opinions are preventing me from tuning in with the crystalline nature of being alive in a transcendent, in a heavenly earth? Because you were born to live in heaven. This is work that we have been doing for centuries to create the context for a greater way of being. In fact, you create an embrace. Mary went on to teach me a different way of relating to life and being present in my own culture without being afraid. And following that, she introduced me to myself. She said, you're exhausted and you want to go home. As I remembered, it was kind of difficult to embrace the sense that I didn't know myself, but all of a sudden I did. It was very obvious to me that I'd been avoiding these feelings, and I chose to return home. I did complete the fast. I began eating meat, and I returned to Ithaca, New York, where I eventually met my wife just a year later and began a family. And during this time, Mary stayed with me and continued to teach me how to be present in this community in a way that is true to myself, no longer feeling like I have to reject culture and mainstream reality as they are in order to maintain my own truth, to be present and trust it. And I hope that this is a good step in helping you to do the same.